Evelyn's world changed when she received the letter. It arrived in a pale, weathered envelope, its edges torn as if it had been passed through too many hands. The elegant handwriting was unmistakable. It was from her late great-aunt, Seraphina Blackwood. Though Seraphina had passed away years ago, Evelyn had never expected to receive anything from her. After all, Seraphina had been reclusive, shrouded in mystery, and no one in the family had truly known her. The letter was short and to the point. Evelyn, the house at Ravenwood Manor is now yours. Come alone. There are things you must understand. Ravenwood Manor. Evelyn had heard of it only in hushed conversations and gossip between her aunts at family gatherings. The house, buried deep in the heart of an old, forgotten village, was said to be cursed, though no one could explain why. It was a relic of the past, towering and brooding amidst the shadows of ancient trees. The stories about it were vague, but all unsettling. Despite the ominous nature of the letter, something inside Evelyn stirred, a curiosity, perhaps even a sense of duty. She felt compelled to visit Ravenwood, if only to settle the unease that had haunted her since she received the letter. Evelyn drove for hours before the trees finally gave way to the crumbling facade of Ravenwood Manor. The air seemed to change as she neared it, heavy, still, as though time itself had forgotten this place. The manor stood, cloaked in shadows, with ivy creeping up its weathered walls like the grasp of long-forgotten hands. As she stepped out of her car, a chill ran through her despite the warmth of the day. The house seemed to breathe, its large, gaping windows like eyes watching her approach. The front door creaked open with a gentle push, as though expecting her arrival. The inside was just as she had imagined. Dust-laden chandeliers, draped furniture, and a faint, lingering scent of something old, something hidden. In the dim light, her footsteps echoed unnervingly. She made her way to the grand foyer, where a single envelope lay waiting on an antique table. Her name was scrawled across it in the same delicate handwriting as the first letter. Her pulse quickened as she unfolded the note. The house remembers Evelyn. Beware the ones forgotten. They wait. That night, Ravenwood began to speak. It started as a faint murmur, barely audible over the wind that rustled the branches outside. Evelyn awoke in the dead of night to a sound she couldn't place. Her breath hitched as she realized it was coming from the walls, a soft, almost melodic whisper, like the flutter of wings in the dark. She sat up in bed, straining to hear. "Who's there?" she called, her voice trembling. Silence. Evelyn climbed out of bed and grabbed the antique lantern by her bedside. Its flickering flame cast dancing shadows on the walls as she stepped into the hallway. The manor was vast, filled with twisting corridors that seemed to lead nowhere. The whispers followed her, growing louder, more insistent. She mustn't know. She mustn't awaken them. Her heart raced as she hurried down the stairs, desperate to escape the suffocating pull of the voices. She reached the grand library, her aunt's sanctuary. There, tucked behind a secret panel in the bookshelf, she found what she hadn't known she was searching for, a leather-bound journal, worn and faded, with Seraphina's initials embossed on the cover. The journal contained Seraphina's thoughts, her discoveries, and her descent into a world far darker than Evelyn could have imagined. Seraphina had spent decades studying the house, documenting its strange occurrences. She wrote about voices, shadows that moved on their own, and the presence of something ancient, buried deep within the manor's walls. The forgotten, Seraphina had called them. Spirits, entities, memories. Seraphina never fully explained what they were, only that they were dangerous and waiting for someone to unlock the door between worlds. Someone like Evelyn. The last entry in the journal was dated the day before Seraphina's death. "I fear I have failed. They know I am close. The forgotten grow restless. Only blood can silence them now." Evelyn felt a cold dread settle over her as she closed the journal. The forgotten were not just stories. They were real, and they were waiting for her. She had to leave, but as she turned to go, the door to the library slammed shut. Panic surged through Evelyn. She ran to the door, pulling at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The lantern flickered, casting eerie light on the walls, and in the mirror hanging above the fireplace, something moved. It wasn't her reflection. Evelyn froze, her eyes locked on the figure in the mirror. It was a woman, her face half hidden by the shadows, her eyes hollow and cold. The woman's lips parted, and a voice, soft, sorrowful, filled the room. "You shouldn't have come." Evelyn backed away, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The woman in the mirror reached out, her hand pressing against the glass as though trying to break free. The air around Evelyn grew colder, and the whispers intensified. "Set us free, Evelyn. Let us out." The lights flickered, and the glass in the mirror cracked, spiderwebbing outwards as if something was pushing from the other side. Evelyn clutched Seraphina's journal to her chest, feeling the weight of her aunt's warnings. She had to get out, had to leave the house before it was too late, desperate to escape. Evelyn made her way to the only place the whispers couldn't seem to reach, the cellar. She had avoided it, knowing that every story of haunted houses warned against descending into the bowels of the place, but now she had no choice. The stairs were steep and narrow, creaking under her weight as she descended. The air grew thick and damp, the scent of mold and decay filling her nostrils. At the bottom of the stairs, she found an old iron door, rusted and covered in strange symbols. With trembling hands, she pushed the door open. The cellar was vast, far larger than she had expected, and filled with strange objects. Old, weathered trunks, broken mirrors, and forgotten relics from a time long past. In the center of the room, an ancient stone well stood, covered with a heavy wooden lid. The whispers grew louder as she approached it, swirling around her like a storm. The well, Seraphina had written, "That's where they're trapped. That's where the blood must be spilled." Evelyn stood at the edge of the well, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the presence of something. No, many things, beneath her, pressing against a barrier that separated them from the world above. The air was charged with energy, thick with the weight of the past. She knew what she had to do. The journal had made it clear. Only blood could seal the door. But whose blood? A sudden sound behind her made her whirl around. Standing in the doorway was Derek. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered, his face pale and eyes filled with fear. "They've been waiting for you." Evelyn stared at Derek, her mind racing. "What do you mean they've been waiting for me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Derek stepped closer, his face etched with sorrow and something far darker. "I didn't know at first," he said quietly, glancing at the well. "I didn't understand what Seraphina was trying to prevent. But after she died, after I came here, I learned the truth." Evelyn's heart pounded as she gripped the edge of the well. "What truth, Derek? What's going on?" He met her eyes, his gaze filled with a painful recognition. The forgotten. They were never just spirits. They were people, trapped here by blood. And the house, it's cursed to pull us all back. Evelyn took a step back, her mind reeling. "Trapped by blood? You mean Seraphina?" Derek nodded slowly. "Yes. And you, Evelyn. It's your bloodline. Seraphina wasn't just protecting the house. She was keeping something terrible at bay. She tried to prevent this, but she failed." The weight of his words settled over her like a suffocating blanket. "And now," she whispered, "now they want me." Derek nodded again, his face a mask of regret. "They need you, Evelyn. Seraphina was able to keep them trapped for years. But without her, the forgotten are growing stronger. They want to return, and only a sacrifice will keep them from breaking free." Evelyn felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her. "Sacrifice," she repeated, the word like a dagger in her chest. "What kind of sacrifice?" Derek looked at her, his eyes brimming with emotion. "It has to be someone of the bloodline. Seraphina's blood or your own. It's the only way to stop them." The weight of Derek's revelation settled over Evelyn like a heavy fog. She stared at the well, the whispers of the forgotten growing louder, more insistent, their voices like a chorus of lost souls. They were pulling her toward the abyss, demanding the blood they had been denied for so long. "No," Evelyn said, shaking her head. "I won't let this happen. There has to be another way." Derek's face was filled with anguish. "I've searched, Evelyn. For years, I've looked for a way out. But this house, it's cursed by something far older than any of us. Seraphina tried everything. Rituals, prayers, but nothing worked. The well must be fed." "Then why didn't you tell me?" Evelyn asked, her voice rising with emotion. "Why bring me here if you knew what the house would demand?" Derek swallowed hard, his voice cracking as he replied, "Because I thought I could save you. That maybe, together, we could break the curse. But now, I see that I was wrong." A sharp, bitter laugh escaped Evelyn's lips. "You thought you could save me? By dragging me into this?" Derek's silence was all the confirmation she needed. He had known, from the very beginning, what the house was capable of, and yet he had brought her here, hoping she could somehow break the cycle. But now, standing at the precipice, Evelyn understood that the house had its own will, its own hunger. The air in the cellar grew colder, the shadows lengthening as the house's dark energy seemed to seep into every corner. The whispers were now a cacophony, calling her name, begging for her to come closer to the well. Evelyn could feel them pulling at her soul, tugging her toward the edge. "It doesn't have to be you," Derek said, his voice low and filled with guilt. "We could find another way." Evelyn shook her head. "There is no other way, Derek. You've said it yourself. It's my bloodline, my responsibility." She paused, her voice softening. "But I won't let this curse take me. I won't feed the house." Derek looked at her, desperation in his eyes. "What are you going to do?" Evelyn glanced at the journal still clutched in her hand. Seraphina knew something she didn't write down. There has to be another way to stop this. She wouldn't have given up so easily. With renewed determination, Evelyn turned back to the well, the lid covering it seemed to vibrate with energy, the whispers now so loud that they drowned out everything else. She knelt beside the well, her fingers tracing the symbols carved into the stone. And then she saw it, a symbol partially obscured by dirt and grime. She brushed it away, revealing a circle entwined with runes. The same symbol was etched into the cover of Seraphina's journal. "What is this?" Evelyn murmured. Derek leaned over, his eyes widening as he studied the markings. "It's an ancient seal. I've seen it before, but I never knew what it was for." Evelyn's heart raced as she flipped through the journal, searching for any mention of the symbol. Finally, she found it. A single line, written in Seraphina's hurried scrawl. The seal must be broken to free the forgotten, but to break it is to risk everything. "We could release them," Derek whispered, horrified. "You're not thinking of—" Evelyn looked at him, her eyes filled with resolve. "If we release them, maybe we can destroy them before they take another life. Maybe that's what Seraphina meant. Or we'll unleash something far worse," Derek countered, his voice trembling. "Evelyn, this could end everything." But Evelyn knew they had no other choice. The house would never stop. The whispers would never fade. She couldn't live with the weight of knowing that someone else, some future descendant, might be forced to make the same decision. She reached for the stone lid, her hand trembling. Derek grabbed her wrist. "Please, Evelyn," he pleaded. "Think about what you're doing." She looked into his eyes, and for the first time, she saw the truth. He wasn't afraid of the forgotten. He was afraid of what they would reveal. "Let go, Derek," she said softly but firmly, pulling her hand free. With a final breath, she pushed the stone lid aside, revealing the dark abyss of the well. The air around them seemed to pulse, the energy crackling with anticipation. The whispers ceased for a moment, the silence more deafening than the noise. Then, from the depths of the well, came a low, guttural sound, a growl, almost human but not quite. Evelyn felt the weight of countless eyes watching her from the darkness below. "They're awake," Derek muttered, his voice barely audible. Evelyn stared into the well, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the presence of the forgotten, their hunger palpable, their desire to be free overwhelming. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of surging out of the well, the air around them grew warmer. The oppressive darkness lifted slightly, and the whispers softened into what almost sounded like a plea. "Help us," they whispered. "Free us." Evelyn's heart raced. The forgotten weren't malevolent. At least, not in the way she had thought. They were trapped, desperate, and perhaps misunderstood. Evelyn turned to Derek. "They don't want to hurt us. They want to be freed from this place." Derek's face twisted in confusion. "How can you be sure? They've been imprisoned for centuries. They're dangerous." "Maybe Serafina wasn't trying to keep them in," Evelyn said, the realization dawning on her. "Maybe she was trying to keep something else out." The house shuddered, as if in response to her words. The well began to glow faintly, and Evelyn could see the outlines of the forgotten, their forms flickering like shadows in the light. She understood then what needed to be done. The curse could only be broken with a willing sacrifice, not of blood, but of the heart, a sacrifice of freedom. "Derek," she said, turning to him, "we need to let them go. If we trap them here any longer, they'll consume us, just like they consumed Serafina." Derek looked at her, torn between fear and trust. "What do we have to do?" Evelyn stepped closer to the well, her hand outstretched. "We have to offer ourselves, not as prisoners but as guides. We have to lead them out of this place." With trembling hands, they both reached into the well, their fingers touching the cold stone. The forgotten's voices swirled around them, softer now, more human. And in that moment, Evelyn felt a rush of understanding. The forgotten had once been like them. Lost souls trapped in the web of the house's curse. But with their help, they could finally be freed. As the light from the well enveloped them, Evelyn and Derek knew they were no longer alone. Together, they would lead the forgotten to their freedom, and in doing so, they would free themselves.